In January 2019, Cornwall Council declared a climate emergency, committing to work towards a zero carbon Cornwall by 2030. To achieve this will require rapid, substantial change across all sectors of Cornish society, as well as major changes of direction by the UK government. However, this declaration is also an opportunity for a bold new vision. Cornwall has the real potential to become a national, even a global leader in sustainability. Our local economy, currently one of the poorest in the EU, could be revitalised with green investment. We could live healthier, more connected lives that restore dignity and harness Cornwall's legacy of resilient innovation to navigate an uncertain future. But we need real leadership. Unless words become action, the declaration is meaningless. The Green Party has been responding to the impending climate crisis for the last 30 years, developing evidence-based policy that offers an alternative green future. We are a party who believe that a better society is possible, one that values people and planet. At the heart of green policy is a commitment to resilient local economies that give us all more power over our lives. The next decade is a watershed for human life on Earth. Either we make rapid, radical changes, or we pass over into a future from which we may never return. This green vision for Cornwall begins a green response to the Climate Emergency Declaration on how to achieve net zero carbon by 2030 in a way that works for all of Cornwall. Single policy changes on their own are not enough. Cornwall needs a renewed vision of its future as a model net zero carbon local economy. This is not just the most evidence-based response to the climate emergency, it is also a way of improving the lives of all the people in Cornwall. This green vision for Cornwall is not the final word, but a marker post in an urgent and vital conversation. It's the year 2030. Bailey is 24. When he was a child, his hometown of Cornwall was one of the poorest places in Europe. That was until the Kerrier Green Fund was established to provide investment in the local renewables sector and in new skills training. Now Bailey is a newly qualified engineer, part of a team responsible for the maintenance of local wind turbines. Bailey's older sister, Poppy, set up her own bakery. She sources all her ingredients from a local food producers cooperative. It provides her with a wholesale discount while guaranteeing farmers a local market, increasing the price they receive at the farm gate and affording them greater protection against shocks. Both Poppy, Bailey and many of their friends and family are part of a local consumers cooperative. Since profits are distributed among members, they get to keep the cut that used to go to the supermarket owner. Their control over the co-op means that they choose which products to stock. After the UK government finally introduced the carbon tax, local food is much cheaper than food that's had to travel long distances. The co-op also participates in the Cornwall-wide Sustainable Food Forum that helps match Cornwall's farming output to what Cornish consumers want to buy. Paul and Sue are farmers from near St Just. Nearly 10 years ago, as new tenants on a council-owned farm, they took part in a programme that helped them move to organic farming. Through a combination of training and financial support, they were able to rapidly change how they used their land. They planted more trees, improved the quality of their soil, and diversified their produce, selling fruit, nuts, and timber, alongside smaller quantities of meat and milk. Now they own their own farm, and their son, Jack, who back then said he was leaving farming behind, has combined his skills as a craftsman with the timber business and joined them. Sue's mother, Peggy, is in her late 70s and lives in a very small village about 8 miles away. Previously, her home was damp, but energy costs were so high that she couldn't afford to heat it properly in winter. She took part in a council-run scheme to retrofit her house with insulation and a more energy-efficient heating system that used renewable source electricity to power it. Bailey's dad actually did the job. He retrained using an adult education grant after previously working as an oil delivery driver. Well, after that, the money Peggy spent on her energy bills was enough to properly heat her home in winter. Sue and Peggy regularly see each other using the extended rural electric bus service, which also means that Peggy has reliable access to Penzance. A portion of Peggy's pension is invested in a similar scheme to the Carrier Green Fund. This provides her with stable payments while ensuring that her money stays in Cornwall and helps to provide new forms of employment for the next generation. In fact, Peggy's granddaughter, Lily, has just taken out a loan to start a clothing business with an all-Cornish supply chain. Claire is a local banker from Bolton who specialises in finance for new builds. She has been working with a variety of local construction firms and housing cooperatives to ensure that affordable homes are actually affordable. Since the land value tax was introduced, land speculation became less profitable, prices began to stabilise, and large-scale developments reduced. Claire's work is accountable to the local Community Planning Forum, a democratically elected body who determine the number and nature of new builds alongside local business rates and other local infrastructure needs. George is a builder who started a small mutual construction business. The new Bodmin Bank also provides loans to startups with super low repayment rates for businesses that can demonstrate positive social and environmental impact. Since George's employees share a stake in the company profits and build energy positive, affordable homes, his working partnership with Claire has meant that George can win business ahead of larger developers. Now, these stories are not particularly dramatic, and they barely mention climate change at all, so why tell them here? Well, the reason is that these are stories about how Cornwall could benefit from a net zero carbon transition. The radical change that is needed to tackle some of Cornwall's most persistent problems and restore dignity to people and communities. A green vision for Cornwall turns a climate emergency into a new lease of life. Behind the scenes of these stories, however, are major changes. So let's explore some of the detail. In order to transition to net zero carbon by 2030, Cornwall's energy use needs to rapidly switch to renewable electricity, with oil and gas phased out. This means a major shift to electric vehicles and a step change investment in public transport to disincentivise the use of cars. It means a major shift to electric heating away from gas and oil. And it means a major increase in renewable electricity supply to power Cornwall. Cornwall already produces 42% of its electricity from renewables, but Cornwall is a renewable energy heaven, and 100% is very achievable by 2030 with the right investment in supply, smart storage and demand management. This will provide local jobs, reduce energy bills and keep energy profits in Cornwall. Net zero carbon by 2030 also means reducing supply chains, since the transport required to move products around is a major source of carbon dioxide emissions. This requires a much more coherent approach to strengthening a workable local economy. Strengthening the local food economy, for example, brings together Cornwall's burgeoning independent food and drink sector with local supply, providing alternative markets for Cornish farmers and keeping profits in Cornwall. Other local industrial innovations can take the same approach. For example, a growing Cornish clothing industry could use established strengths like local design and develop new local manufacturing to provide new types of employment. We know some raw material clothing crops can be grown in Cornwall, allowing farmers opportunities for diversification. We need to explore a variety of similar innovations that can reduce the CO2 from supply chains while strengthening the local economy. Cornwall also needs to sequester a lot more carbon, which means a massive tree planting and soil improvement programme. Since 80% of Cornwall is agricultural land, this means major farming reform. Despite our extraordinary landscape, tree cover in Cornwall is only around 6%, depending how you measure, which is one of the lowest in the UK, which itself is very low compared to the rest of Europe. A massive tree planting programme cannot be a standalone policy, however, but requires a wholesale transition to ecological farming practice, for which farmers will need substantial economic support as well as relevant training. In order to establish all this, however, we also need alternative approaches to financing that allow for local investment and local return, and that prioritise community ownership. Where money comes from and where it goes to is not disconnected from our climate emergency. The climate emergency cannot be addressed without a transition to a much more robust local Cornish economy. And a local economy cannot survive, let alone thrive, without local systems of finance. Otherwise, profits get extracted and exported elsewhere, and reinvestment remains in the fickle hands of multinational institutions with no commitment to place. New local banks and funds that prioritise local investment can help to restructure a local economy in a way that works for the whole community. A green future has to be a shared future. Now, this is not a political programme that tinkers around the edges. It requires major, rapid changes. The good news is that implementing these changes would make Cornwall a better place to live and work. Now, Cornwall Council alone cannot achieve net zero carbon by 2030. It will also require UK government and EU level changes, as well as collaboration within Cornwall. However, the climate emergency is real, and Cornwall Council must act. It unveiled a climate emergency response back in July, and we were pleased to see signs of real ambition. Frankly, it's good to see other parties adopting policies that we've been advocating for years. However, the Council's proposals do not yet go far enough. In particular, we have 7 areas in which the response should be strengthened. Firstly, We were pleased to see Cornwall Council set out to become a leader in farming practice, using council-owned farmland, which accounts for about 1.7% of Cornwall's total, to help new leasing farmers manage a transition to innovative, ecologically friendly and financially sustainable farming practice. We recommend that to increase the impact of this work, Cornwall Council should attempt to form a partnership approach with other large farming landlords, for example the National Trust, to create a Cornwall sustainable farming mark. Secondly, we were also pleased to see a major tree planting initiative announced. However, although ambitious by recent standards, the number of trees proposed is still far less than this emergency situation requires. Major farming reform is required to facilitate the substantial expansion of hedgerows and the cultivation of woodland as part of standard Cornish farming practice, as well as much stronger protection against the destruction of existing complex ecosystems, which newly planted trees can take decades or even longer to establish. Farmers cannot be made responsible for these huge changes, especially when they are already struggling with very difficult market conditions. This reform requires changes at national and EU level to change the structure of the support that farmers receive. Ecologically progressive farming practice must be financially rewarded. But we also have a responsibility to engage with our local farming community, who are part of the foundation of Cornish life, to figure out a future together. Small changes at local level, for example through local cooperatives, can provide the local market required for incremental changes to be made. This alone, of course, is not enough, but it is an important part of the process of transitioning to a sustainable local economy. Thirdly, we were pleased to see that Cornwall Council has committed to retrofit all council-owned properties. But we recommend that the Cornwall Leadership Board initiate a much more ambitious project to retrofit all inefficient homes, not just council-owned properties. A strategic partnership with energy firms could, for example, issue 10-year bonds backed by existing energy bills that could pay for work to be carried out and then use the energy savings achieved to pay back the bonds. We need that kind of innovative thinking. Number 4, it was good to see commitments to implement the electrification of Cornwall's public transport vehicles, but we need much more ambition to facilitate a Cornwall that relies far less on car travel. This is one of the areas that Cornwall Council really does have the power to act since it gained control of transport policy under the 2015 devolution deal. We need more and better public transport so that taking a bus or train is not just a last resort for people who can't afford a car, but the default option for getting anywhere in Cornwall. Now, these last 3 changes are also crucial, but were really not sufficiently addressed at all in Cornwall Council's climate emergency response. So, number 5, we need major investment in new renewable energy. Cornwall Council's budgets have been drastically cut by Westminster, so finding new sources of income is a priority. Renewable energy is a priority sector for a sustainable Cornish economy, with energy export as well as local supply a major part of our future. Cornwall Council can protect its long-term finances and strengthen local resilience by investing now in this vital Cornish industry. But the total investment required for Cornwall's renewable sector is far more than even an ambitious council could provide. The Local Enterprise Partnership has made investment in renewables a core feature of its own 2030 vision, but planning regulations hamper progress. This is a national issue which requires central government action to remove the blockages to progress. Cornwall Council should petition the government for a bylaw that would allow it discretion over planning for local onshore wind generation. And it should also encourage all town and parish councils to include ambitious renewable energy proposals within their neighbourhood development plans. Number 6, Cornwall Council needs a far more robust approach to planning. It should use existing planning laws to require that all new buildings conform to energy positive design using EPC and microgeneration requirements. This is not a change to building regulations, which is held by Westminster, but an enforcement of local considerations in planning approval. If a building can't demonstrate a net positive contribution to Cornwall, it shouldn't get planning permission. However, there are genuine problems with the existing system that empowers large developers to go over the heads of local concerns and appeal directly to central government. We need urgent building regulations change at national level, but at least as importantly, we need further devolution to empower Cornwall to make our own decisions about what gets built, how, where, and by whom. We can't build a sustainable local economy if the basis of our local life together is consistently undermined by large developers parachuting whole new places into Cornwall. New communities need to grow from the ground up, not be imposed from above. We urgently need stronger local democracy. And number 7, the Local Enterprise Partnership, which includes Cornwall Council representation, should push for a major and rapid transition to a more resilient and sustainable local economy as part of the 2019 Local Industrial Strategy Review. This should prioritise a clear, practical roadmap for a step change in Cornwall's local food and drink and energy industries that strengthens local supply chains and boosts local ownership. It should also use these leading-edge sectors of Cornwall's economy to build other sustainable local manufacturing capacities, such as clothing, timber, house building. Of course, from central government, we need a carbon tax now. We need a land value tax now. We need a Green New Deal now. We need national farming and fishing reform now. We need planning reform, energy reform, finance reform now. And for Cornwall, we demand more devolution now. This is an emergency. We do not have time to wait. Cornwall is a place like no other, and our future is one that we shape together. It is a future that will be defined by Cornish character, long-term stewardship, by resilience, and by non-conformist creativity. For too long, the people who take care of this land and sea that we call home and who cultivate it carefully for food, they have been taken for granted. Farming and fishing are at the very heart of our Cornish culture, but they have been degraded by decades of so-called free market policy which tears at the symbiotic relationship between local Cornish communities and the land and sea that sustains us. Our farmers and fishers instinctively understand and respect the ecological rhythms of land and sea. But those who have not been forced out of business have been forced into unsustainable practices by a perverse system that rewards environmental degradation. Long-term stewardship of our land and oceans must be returned to Cornish communities, along with the support necessary to transition to a sustainable future. We are the stewards of this land, these seas. We need the power to steward them well. Cornwall's rugged landscape is reflected in our resilient character. But the peninsula that powered the Industrial Revolution now finds itself at the mercy of a post-industrial age. While we have benefited from EU investment, the Cornish economy remains fragile, with profits continually extracted and then enjoyed elsewhere. We may be resilient in character, but we are not yet resilient in structure. A sustainable future means a much more local future. It means local food for local markets, local energy with local infrastructure, local clothing manufacture, local construction. We carry with us a strong local culture, local language, local heritage. We have what it takes to be resilient, but we need the infrastructure and systems that keep value local. This rugged land is our home. It can only thrive with resilient communities that protect it for the future. We are a resilient people. We need the power to build a resilient economy. And whether it's the world-changing invention of the steam engine or the modernist art of St. Ives, Cornwall does not settle for the status quo. This is a non-conformist culture that digs deep into the past to find resources that can transform the future. We have thriving independent businesses, but they are threatened by the privileges shown to large corporations. Independent house builders are outmaneuvered by large developers. Independent high street shops are pushed under by retail parks. Cornwall's independent culture refuses to conform, as our strong independent sector shows, but it is really tough. Cornwall has the independent spirit to create an entirely new future, but we need the power to shape our own destiny. We are the creative non-conformists. We will find a way to an alternative future. The climate emergency is real and demands urgent action. This Green Vision for Cornwall provides a set of priorities that can and should shape policy and decision making over the coming years. Thank you.